All right, let's begin. Okay, good morning. Welcome everybody to the first community briefing of fiscal year 22 for the Communities of Color Nonprofit Stabilization Fund, or the CCNSF. Can everyone hear me okay? Panelists? Okay, great, thank you. I am Fernando Aguilar and I administer the grants on behalf of the Hispanic Federation, as I am the Director for Contracts and Grants here at the Federation. Just a couple housekeeping items. This online webinar will be made available on the CCNSF und.org website. Give us about 48 hours to get that up on our updates page. However, this PowerPoint will be emailed to each of the attendees today following this briefing. With me to introduce themselves are my colleagues at Hispanic Federation, as well as members of the other partner organizations. With that, I'm going to pass it along to Admika to introduce herself and pass it on to Canela from there.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. My name is Almirka Santiago, and I'm the AVP for Contracts and Operations, Grant Making and Operations at Hispanic Federation. Canela.
I'm Canela Torres, and I am the Grants Manager at Hispanic Federation. And now on to Ju from the Asian American Federation.
Morning, folks. My name is Ju Han. I'm the Deputy Director at the Asian American Federation. We are the technical assistance partner in the NSF grant. We have leadership programs for EDs, mid-level managers and directors, also a lot of capacity building workshops to support organizations serving communities of color. So good to see everybody here on this morning. Pass it on to Anita.
Folks, my name is Anita from CACF. We are working with Asian American Pacific Islander led and serving organizations, and so happy to see everyone here today. And I will pass it on to Yvonne.
Good morning, everyone. My name is Yvonne Smothers. I'm the program coordinator for the CCNSF program for New York Urban League. Now I'll pass, I think everyone, Christina.
Hi, good morning, everyone. I'm Christina Ramos. I'm the Director of Membership Services at the Hispanic Federation, and I create the curriculum for our capacity building webinar series throughout the year. Good to have you all with us. Thank you. Back to Fernando, I think.
Thank you, everyone. As we begin this presentation, we'll send out 3 polling questions. If you can partake in those, we'd love to continue to get a sense of who is in the virtual room today. Got a lot of people and so excited about that. With that, let's launch our first polling question. It will ask which borough your organization is located in. You can give a moment to complete that. While we do so, we wanted to give thanks and shout outs to the New York City Council, City Council Finance, and the Department of Youth and Community Development, which this grant would not be possible with the help of all 3 of those agencies. So thank you. Okay. Canela, if you want to share the results. Right, so it looks like we have a good amount of representation in each borough. Mm-hmm. Fantastic. Although my Staten Island peeps, where are y'all? We're lagging there. Great. So we can start with the PowerPoint now. Thank you. So the 3 partners who introduced themselves, myself included, are part of administrating the grants. Our 4th partner, AAF, Asian American Federation, provides technical assistance to all those that apply. These grants that are administered, of course, fall under capacity building, an area of which is often overlooked by our funders. Next slide, please. Great. Now just a little history. This fund began in 2015, providing 80 awards during its inaugural year, and since has supported over 490 different projects. With an amount this year of 3.7 million, while a healthy amount, we continue to advocate for increased funding each year. Let's see, and touching on the purpose of this fund, it's widely felt that if we imbue our nonprofit organizations with the skills that they require to continue their work, which is you folks, then you all will be better equipped to serve our communities. Hence, the CCNSF continues. Before we move on to the next slide, we'd like to launch the second polling question, please. Second polling question asks if you are a first-time applicant to the CCNSF fund. Just give a couple minutes, moments here. Okay, looks like everyone submitted their response. Canela, if you want to share those results. And fantastic, it looks like almost a little less than an even split. Okay. Thank you. You know, good to see all you returning applicants and those new to the fund. As you've noticed, you can feel free to use the chat function. Today, you can ask questions during this presentation through the chat function. Just know that we will keep track of those questions and we will have a question and answer period at the end of the presentation. So if you either wanted to put your question in the chat field now, we'll keep track, or if you wanted to hold your questions to the Q&A period, either is fine. Okay, now to present slide 3, we're passing it on to Ju.
So can you all hear me? Because they're literally building a building outside my window. Can you hear me? Okay, I'm gonna just talk loud. I'm so sorry, it's been crazy for the past few days. So I'm gonna launch the third poll, I think at the end of the third slide, since you've been taking a lot of polls, I wanna talk through some of these points. So eligibility requirements for applicants. Some of you all know this, since about 60% of you have applied for NSF in the past. You need to be registered with the city's passport and accelerator systems. Last year, everything went online. So if you haven't done this and you haven't gotten funding recently, it sounds much easier, but it's actually been taking more time. So you do want to make sure that you're registered in both those systems. Obviously, making sure that you're also registered with the Charities Bureau. And you have to have been, I know there were a lot of 501c3s that cropped up during COVID, but also want to make sure that you have had your 501c3 status for at least 2 years. And that the majority of folks that you are serving are New York City residents, so 75% and above. And that you have experience serving communities of color, at least 51% of your clients are people of color, and that you've had some demonstrated outreach to communities of color for recruitment of your leadership. The one thing that's highlighted that I want to emphasize, and that I will talk about in the poll in just a minute, is your organizational budget has to be between 150,000 to 2 million. So that's going to be based on your latest audited Form 990. So oftentimes for folks, that's going to be the 2019 990 is like what seems to be available for most people. So they're not, I think there was a question in the chat of, if we factor in volunteer time and that kind of bumps us up, that's not going to be taken into consideration. It's going to be looking at your latest filed 990 to determine your organizational budget size. So someone had also asked the question, hey, this fiscal year, we're a little bit over 2 million, do we still qualify? And again, the question is, if your latest 990 shows that you're under 2 million, you would qualify. And obviously you have commitment and capacity and track record of having provided culturally competent services. And if you are an organization that utilizes a fiscal sponsor, you are not eligible. I know there are some organizations in the past that have had that question, so just want to be clear. So I'm going to launch the third polling question just to make sure folks understand and see where folks fall in the room. And that third question is your organization's last audited budget $2 million or less? And that's a hard and fast sort of cutoff. The New York City Council does not allow us to consider organizations that have a budget of over 2 million. So take 15 more seconds to answer that question. So again, I think about 50 or some odd folks have participated. So I'm going to end the poll, share the results, and it looks like good news. 96% of you who took the poll are saying that you are under 2 million. So that's good news. Okay. Next slide. Is this the next slide? Yeah, next slide. Capacity building projects. So there are 7 buckets of projects that you can apply for. And again, more than half of you are familiar with these project categories. We have management, information systems, design, and development. So that could be looking like, you know, potentially you want to help set up Salesforce at your organization for like donor management or something like that. Financial management and planning. We've had organizations in the past apply to set up QuickBooks in their organization. That's something that they haven't used before. Evaluation outcomes system development is another one, as well as leadership development, kind of go through all the new program planning and development, strategy and organizational development, and lastly, collaboration and strategic alliances. This is one, I think the last category is not one where folks have applied a lot for, but an example that you might think about is if your organization and you are working with another, you want to work with another organization that potentially doesn't have services in a certain area, you could think about, you know, bring on a consultant to help you figure out how to kind of scale through that partnership. So the one and only thing that I would point out is if you've received NSF funding in the past and you're applying again, it can't be in an area where you've already received funding. So if you've gotten money for management information systems design and development, even if it's a different project, you can apply for the same category. So please be aware of that, because I know there are folks who've gotten multi-year funding from NSF funding over the course of several years. So I just want to point that out to you. So know that there's 2 types of requests that you can make depending on your org budget size. If you are between 150,000 to 500, you can request up to 35,000. Right. But if your organizational budget is $5,001 and above, up to 2 million, you can request up to 45,000. Again, you don't have to ask for the full amount, but that's the ceiling of what you can ask for based on your org size. And we'll talk a little bit more about what the potential budget breakdown might look like, and some parameters around how to kind of develop your budget. So I see questions coming in. We'll definitely address those at the end. I'm going to hand it over, I think, to Anita.
So a big change this year is that our CCNSF applications are completely moved to online. We're actually using the SurveyMonkey tool to collect applications this year. So for those of you who've applied in the past, just make note that this is going to be a shift. We're not going to be receiving any applications via email or directly from you all outside of what goes through SurveyMonkey. And that SurveyMonkey is managed by DYCD. And as a reminder to everyone, you'll be applying to one of 3 organizations, Hispanic Federation, CACF, or New York Urban League. And that application and the selection you make to apply to an organization is dependent on your client population and your leadership and your organizational focus in terms of communities that you're serving. So just, you know, if you have any questions about that, feel free to reach out to us. We do always get questions about which organization to apply to. And so, you know, we can help walk through that with you all. If you have questions about, you know, I serve more than one community, of course, we understand that. And so, you know, we can help if you have questions about who to apply to. But again, apply to only one of the 3 organizations, and this will be going online. Can you switch slides? So the process is actually going to start with an interest survey. Many of you have already filled out that interest survey, which is wonderful. We encourage folks to fill out that interest survey as soon as possible. Even if you may or may not be applying, we encourage you to fill out the interest survey so that you can get access to an application link and that you can then scroll through and see this application. The only way to get the application link is through an interest survey. So that is a mandatory step. You will actually, the reason is because you'll actually be getting a unique application link, and everyone gets a particular link. We recommend that the link be sent to the person who will actually be completing the application. So it will only be able to be opened on one device and by the person who is filling out the application is our recommendation and suggestion, obviously, because that would make the most sense for you all. And so just be cautious about that. When you fill out the interest survey, they'll ask you where you would like to send the application link to. And so be sure to fill in the correct name and email contact. The application can be put down for a minute and come, you can come back to it. So SurveyMonkey will allow you to take a number of days to complete your application, so you don't have to do it all at one sitting. And so you can feel free to do that. Again, you would have to access that application on the same device that you open it on initially. So just be cautious about that. If you don't want to open it on a cell phone or things like that, you want to open it on a computer and the device that you're going to be using. Great, and I'm going to pass it on to Yvonne.
Good morning again, everyone. The City Council vetting process. The City Council uses programs such as Lexis Comprehensive Business Report Search, which looks for principals, tax warrants, liens, workers' compensation violations, addresses. And this is definitely true because we've had several applicants return to us for liens and tax warrants and things like that. So my suggestion to you is to go online, do whatever you need to do and check your organization status so that you can clear up anything that's necessary for your vetting. So they use Lexis News Article Search, the IRS database search for tax exempt status, the New York State Department of State Corporations database, New York State Tax Warrant Notice database, the New York City Department of Buildings, Location and Occupancy Status, the New York City Department of Health and Mental Hygiene, group child care services, daycare center inspections. These things are definitely tracked. Review of use of funds to ensure that monies are not used in any prohibited manner. Your conflict of interest forms you must have, charities exemption if it applies to you, and the authorization forms review. Next slide. Okay, the vetting process for consultants. Basically the same thing. They look for the very same things for your consultants. And you must remember that consultants cannot be employees, have worked for you on your board, or any of the following. So they use the Lexis Comprehensive Business Report Search, doing the same thing as the organization, principals, tax warrants, liens, workers' compensation violation, addresses, etc. The Lexis News Search, searching for negative news about that person, registration with the State Attorney General's office, Google and social media, and conflict of interest forms are necessary. So please, if you have consultants that you're considering, make sure you check their background, and also make sure you have that person have proper credentials. We have a lot of them that come in with same names, and they'll come back to us and say, can you supply the address, or can you supply a driver's license or something, to let us know that this is not a person that we're looking at with a warrant. So please do your homework before you submit your consultants. Thank you. Next slide.
Thank you, Yvonne.
Okay.
Lots of good questions coming in on the chat. Instead of answering them one by one, we'll save it to the Q&A period. Don't worry, we'll get to all of your questions, all really good ones, and I'm glad we'll have a robust conversation during that period. So this PowerPoint that you all will receive contains very straightforward budget templates. You'll see in a second. So again, this PowerPoint will be emailed to you folks. So I'm just going to give an overview of the budget parameters. There are 4 line items or categories for which you can allocate your funding towards. They are listed here: salaries and wages, fringe, consultant line, and OTPS, other than personnel services. Make sure you do not exceed the caps for each line. This slide is really just to stress the idea that there are caps for each line, and to not go over that when you're submitting your budget. The caps are listed here, as well as listed on the online application. I'm going to go through the caps with you on the next slide as we show you an example of the budget. Perfect. Thanks, Ganella. Okay, so like you said, if you're an organization that has an annual operating budget of $150,000 to $500,000, you can apply to up to $35,000. Here on the example budget, this org has indicated their breakdown for each category. They would like to utilize the full possible amounts for each line without going over any caps. So for the salaries and wages line, they've allocated the full amount of $10,500, which takes into consideration a cap on that line of 30% of the total budget request. Okay, so it's 30% of the total budget, which is $35,000. The most is $10,500. Okay, the fringe line below sees a cap of 15% of the above salary line. So not of the total budget, but of whatever you're allocating towards salary. The greatest dollar amount should be provided on the next line, which is your consultants line. The cap is at 60%. So that means up to, for this budget example, that means up to $21,000 can be allotted to this line. Lastly, your other than personnel services line does not have a cap per se. However, if you allocate any computer hardware or software under this OTPS line, there is a 30% cap on those purchases. And be careful, because it's easy to spot those when you're submitting your receipts, and they will add up. Okay. So when, if you want to scroll down, thank you, Canela. So here you will, next slide actually, that just talks about the caps. Perfect. So but here you will you actually see the narrative breakdown for each category that the org is planning to spend this funding on. If you are granted and you're asked to revise your budget, then you will do so and resubmit. Either way, if you're asked to resubmit a budget, or if what you turned in is approved, you'll follow this budget like a roadmap into your spending for the contract year, okay, for the 6-month period. So this is your guide. Don't go outside of this budget for any circumstances. And again, this is just an example of how we would like to see things broken down on the online application. You know, please make sure you keep a copy of your budget, as you will not receive a copy of your proposal from SurveyMonkey. So make sure you have a copy of this, or not of this particular template, but make sure you have yours broken down and you have that with you. Okay. For those of your organizations with an operating budget, you can advance to the next slide, Canela. Perfect. For those of the organizations with an operating budget of $501,000 up to $2 million, you can apply for up to $45,000. And this is an example of a breakdown that follows again. This is just a general guide for you when you're submitting your budget. Okay. So now next to speak further regarding consultants, Ju will take over from the next slide, please.
Sure. So I'm going to kind of go through each of these points, even though you can read them yourself, because I feel like it's important to underscore. So obviously consultants can't be existing staff, even if they have skills that you'd like to bring on, or current or former interns, relatives of staff or family or board members. City Council wants to know that you've done your due diligence. You're actually hiring consultants that are not in some way have connections to your organization in the ways I mentioned here. You do want to identify your consultants from the beginning. So I think someone had asked the question earlier, can you just say that you're going to use a consultant and not identify them? As folks know, if you've applied for NSF funding in the past, the vetting process for a consultant can be laborious. So it's much easier for you, and timeline wise, it will just make things much more efficient if you identify a consultant in the beginning and name that person, and you should probably interview them, you should check their references and submit their information with the application, which will make the processing or the screening of your application much faster. So someone also mentioned this, some of you are already familiar that the budget allocation, whether for a for-profit or a nonprofit consultant, it's capped at 60% of the total award. So whether you're applying for 40, 35 or less, or 45 or less, it's going to be capped at whatever request amount at 60%, because the whole idea behind NSF funding is to build the capacity of nonprofits serving communities of color, so that like most of your funding is not going straight out to a consultant, which doesn't necessarily build capacity for organizations. So just be aware of that, that parameter. And again, the proposed consultant has to submit current documentation. They'll be vetted in the current year. You do want to, again, make sure that you do your due diligence, when you submit your application versus afterwards, and naming an unknown. And being able to, in the application, there's a question where they say, why this consultant over other consultants? So we've had folks in the past who've used, you can use consultants who are not necessarily based in New York, but if you're, using somebody in California, for example, what is your rationale for using that person versus over here? And we always do encourage, utilizing consultants of color. And we've had, lists in the past where folks have used different consultants. And I know some of the consultants might even be on this committee briefing. Next slide. So when you're submitting your applications, you want to, for the consultants, attaching the following documents. As I said, resume, their EIN of Social Security, contact info, conflict of interest, client list, and again, the rationale for why you chose this consultant. So you are able to bring on more than one consultant. I think there have been times in the past where groups have requested to bring on more than one, but just again, know that it's a total 60% cap of your budget for all consultants, not just each consultant. Okay, so Anita, I'm going to pass it over to you.
Great. So we are right now at the RFA stage, and I think Canela, you can populate the timeline. And of course, you are all attending the briefing. The big critical date is that applications are due on October 22nd. So I think that's what we're all working towards. And they are again on SurveyMonkey. So they would be, you would be needing to have uploaded your application and finalized your SurveyMonkey by October 22nd at 5 p.m. So that's the cutoff that we'll be working towards. And again, please contact us if you feel like you have questions that we're not able to answer here today, or if you're attending the next community briefing, we'll also have opportunities to ask for questions then as you progress in your application. All of the partner organizations will put together an allocation panel that will review applications in November. We are hopeful that we will get through the vetting processes necessary and announce awards in December. So before the end of the year. We expect all projects to begin in January. I think that was a question, January to June. So this is important for you to think about as you apply, is that your project scope needs to be created in a fashion that can be completed in 6 months. So just keep that in mind. It has to be a feasible project to be completed within the time frame. We'll have orientations in January for those awarded, and then we'll have interim and final reporting due in the month specified here on the slide. All the funds must be spent down by June 30th, 2022. And the reason we have such strict timelines and boundaries on this particular funding source is because this is a government funding source and a city council funding source. And so the partners who are providing the grant, CCNSF, Hispanic Federation, and New York Urban League, are constantly reporting back to City Council about all of the awards, and we're going to be definitely following up to make sure that everyone can meet the timeline that is set out by this particular funding stream. So it's important that, and we will definitely provide support around your projects and around the award and budgeting and things of that nature. We're always here and open to hearing from you, questions from you, to make sure that this is successful for all of us. And that CCNSF continues to be a wonderful program that can support all of our infrastructure and capacity building needs in our organizations. So, so just for those who are new, to understand that these are bound by our timelines, and our work is definitely bound by government contracting standards. That would be the end of that slide. Is there the next? Great. And I think that this, for resources, we have our wonderful website. So please do go to the website. There's a lot of resources there. We do have case examples of previous grant projects and the RFA that has a lot of the information that we're sharing with you today. We have our sample budgets and everything. That website is a really great source of information. This recording of this webinar will also be placed on the website. So please, visit the website, read through, and then again, if you have questions, you can contact us.
Fantastic. Thank you, partners. And we'll now enter into our question and answer period. Ju, if you want to kind of steer the ship on some of the questions that might have come in that we missed.
Sure. Let's start with what's in the Q&A. We answered the question, I think, for about, can you count volunteer time towards your budget so that it bumps it up to 150? And we said no. Again, we'll be looking at your last file, Form 990, to determine what your budget size is. So for folks who are concerned that fiscal year 21 or 22, their budget was over 2 million, again, we'll be looking at your last file, Form 990, to determine your budget size. The question that one person, Hoon, had was, he asked if consultants could be former staff.
Yeah, I mean, oftentimes we do have that. And so it's just really important that they not be current staff. We understand that your organizations would love to choose consultants that understand your programs and the communities you serve. And that's part of the beauty of CCNSF, is allowing for us to choose the consultants that make the most sense. So we'll definitely, all consultants need to fill out a conflict of interest, and they should not be on staff or salaried at all, but they can definitely know your organization.
Okay, thanks, Anita. So somebody asked, do you actually have to do you have to include a consultant in your application? Can you actually use the full award for staff and board to complete the project and not not utilize consultants?
You know, this grant is, we consider it a discovery grant. You know, you're discovering new skills and new tools outside of your organization and outside of what your staff comes equipped with. And so, you know, this grant is implemented to reach out to consultants and bring in a consultant to, again, build those skills that wouldn't normally be within your organization. So no, this is a grant that specifically is entailed to for you to hire a consultant and build those skills that'll stay with the organization for years on end.
Thanks, Fernando. One technical question about if there's a page limit for the consultant scope of work on that new online application.
Say that one again, Jim. Sorry.
Someone asked if there's a page limit for the consultant scope of work on the online application. I'm not familiar with that.
I think for the online application, we do have word limits specified. So take a look. Each field has particular word limits. If we don't actually have a word limit on a particular field, then we just would appreciate if you kept things concise. And, you know, definitely make your points, but keep them as concise as possible. But I think most of the fields that we require narratives will have word limitations.
Yeah. And somebody had asked if they could apply through a fiscal sponsorship. So we said that if you can, I think that was right. Like if you can't, right? If you utilize a fiscal conduit, you are not eligible to apply.
Right.
Another technical paper question is, does Exhibit B need to be notarized this year? I think this is later. Does it need to contain the subcontractor's name, or would the organization name suffice? I think this is for later on for the contract portion, right? So yeah, but by the way, so the city is requiring notaries again. And then in addition to the 60% budget cap for consultants, is there also a dollar amount cap? Previously, there was a $65,000 cap of total project funding for each consultant across projects.
That still applies.
Yeah, so 60% cap, but also if that consultant is supporting other organizations with their projects, we will cap them at 75,000 across all the administrating partners. So not just each community.
And that really then it kind of speaks to kind of trying to pinpoint your consultant ahead of time when the application is due. So then what we do is we keep track on the back end of the consultants that are being utilized and make sure that they don't reach that cap. And if they do, then we have to go back and ask organizations to shift their consultant.
Okay. I'm going to skip over some of the early questions that we did answer in the chat and go to the ones that we didn't answer. And if you feel like I skipped over your question, feel free to drop in the chat again. So again, I think the questions that we had in the chat were like, can it not be the same category as any prior funding received from the CCNSF? And that's the case. So even if it was 5 years ago that you got funding for like leadership development, you cannot apply again for the same bucket or same category of work. So there are some groups I know who've gotten funding multiple years. So be mindful of that, because you don't want to put in for an application and get it summarily rejected because you already put in for it. So, I think Michael also had that question, so I'm going to skip over that. Again, Anita said this, you can, as long as you kind of put in placeholders, you can, as long as that unique link on one device, you can go back and you don't actually have to start all over again each time.
I see a lot of the questions around that specific point, and I think we can upload a blank unfillable copy of the SurveyMonkey so that folks can see it. We can upload that. Sorry, I just see that a lot
Right.
of the blank. So yeah, we can do that for you, but it's going to be completely unfillable. You have to go to SurveyMonkey and fill out the application.
Right. So I think there was a question from a consultant saying, do we have to fill out the interest survey? So if we put up the application as sort of like just like a view form, then folks can be able to see what questions come up.
Right, and we thought this through, like that this was that's why we did the interest survey is because we all have, you know, we apply, the partners apply for grants all the time too, and we come across the same issue. So the reason why we did put the survey interest in place is so that we could go back to the application and see the questions and then know what we would need to populate. So we did try to think that through, and we thought that this was the best option. It was an extra step on your part, you know, having to fill out that interest survey. But again, we think that this is the best we could do on the first round of making this online.
Yeah, we are excited / a little scared, but I think it's going to be great. So someone asked, Asante asked, does each organization need to source a consultant based on the type of project you're applying for? So again, when you're, you know, including information about the consultant, like their resume, rationale for choosing this consultant, you do want to make sure that they have expertise in what you're hiring them for, because that's going to be looked at. We talked about making sure your expenses are from January to June, because that's when the announcements will be made, and you know, awardees will not be able to expense before that. So let me just. Someone asked, is it possible to partner with another organization in order to meet that $150,000 threshold? And that's a no. We will be looking at each individual applying organization's last filed Form 990. So we cannot combine budgets. Susan asked if there is a list of qualified consultants that will be provided after this community briefing.
That's there's not a list of consultants that we've endorsed in any way. We do have a list of consultants that we've seen used in the past for the projects, for the 490 projects. And we can email that to you if you reach out to us. We'll get you again a list of consultants we've seen used in the past, and it's not an endorsement on any consultant.
Mm-hmm. There's some questions about in the past when we've provided some templates like a blank budget, even though we're now doing everything online, a sample conflict of interest form. Is that something that we can provide or post to the CCNSFfund.org website?
Definitely, we can.
Yes,
we can provide those links. We can provide those links on the website. Those conflict of interest forms are through the city, so we'll provide those links through MOX. And we can also, I think Michael had a question of a blank budget. Again, won't be able to populate, but we can put a PDF up there of that blank budget. Yep.
Great. I think we didn't answer this question. What if your organization is staffed by a consultant? Can you not use a salary line item at all then?
Say that again, Jim.
Can you repeat that?
Sure. Someone said, Joey said, what if your organization is staffed by a consultant? So maybe I feel like Joey's saying that they don't have paid staff. Like, can you not use a salary line item at all then if your organization is staffed by a consultant?
Well, I mean, you would use who's the executive director, or I mean, who's the person that's asking that question? Is that
right? And so if Joey, you could kind of add more information, because I think we need a little bit more information to answer that question. Michael asked, there is a question around the organization's ability to deliver programs in a culturally and linguistically competent manner, and then describes the organization's current and past record of providing services with cultural and linguistic competence. How do these questions differ? I guess he's talking about the application. This is Michael.
I mean, that's just, I mean, they let's see, they really complement each other, but it's up to you as the person that's writing the application to make it as strong as possible, and to identify those areas which you are strongest in. And and this is a competitive grant, so submit the strongest points you can on each.
Thanks, Fernando. Sam asks, is there a requirement or preference for us to sustain the newly funded consultant after June 2022? Must we establish sustainability of funding after June 2022?
No, that is not necessary at all. We actually do appreciate projects that are thought of as within the 6-month period. So the scope of work should definitely reflect the period that this grant covers. It is absolutely fine to have this grant be a part of a larger project, or, if you are thinking about continuing some of the work, it's great to share that, but it's not necessary to sustain the consultant.
Great, thank you. Susan asked if there's a more detailed description of what falls under each category. I'm assuming she means project descriptions, and I would say go to CCNSFfund.org that has a description of what each category encompasses. And then someone said, if our last filed Form 990 is in 2019, is this okay? And the answer is yes, because that's the last filed for a lot of organizations. Laura asked, what are the 3 organizations you can apply to? Are the folks you see here. So Coalition for Asian American Children and Families, if you're applying for the Asian community, Hispanic Federation for the Latinx community, and then New York Urban League for Black community. Yeah, so same question around applying for same categories. You cannot, if you've already, okay, let me differentiate. If you've applied for a category in the past, a project category, but you have not received funding in that category, you can still apply for that same category. But if you've been funded in that category, you cannot apply again for the same category.
Thanks, Judy.
Someone said my organization has adopted a co-ED model of leadership. So they've got 2 co-EDs. Is it okay to submit and apply with this organizational structure?
Correct, yes.
Sure.
Yep. Will the funds support the same organization 2 years in a row? Yes, we've had organizations funded over multiple, not for the same project, but in different years. So yes. I think, yeah, go ahead.
I also wanted to mention that this year, the conflict of interest forms are not going to be due unless you're granted. So we will send you those documents if you are granted, and then you will present those to us upon submission of your signed award letter. So let's not focus too much on those documents now. Let's focus on this application.
Great. And then last question was, is there a list of requirements for consultants that can be accessed without requesting an application link? I think it's on the CCNSFfund.org website, right? Yeah, and we can definitely drop that again in the chat just so folks can easily access. So the only thing I would advise, I think if there's any, and definitely I would send it over to my panelists if they have closing comments, is please don't wait until 5 minutes before the deadline. I totally get why we do that because we're all so strapped for time. But we don't, this new online system, as excited as we are, we also don't know if it's going to crash or what will happen if there's like an influx of everyone doing at that time. So you don't want to get to a place where it's after the submission time, and like they're very strict about that. So the city is, so we don't want you to risk that. So plan ahead as much as you can. And if you could do it either the morning of, the day before, latest, I would suggest that not wait till the very last minute.
And then I'm not sure, Joey Gustafson, if we've answered your question or not. It looks like maybe not. So just reach out to us over email, whatever partner organization you might be applying to. Either reach out to Anita, myself, or Yvonne, and we'll talk about that offline.
Yep, and all the partners' contact information is also on the website. You can find emails and phone numbers there. Any closing remarks from our panelists before we wrap up the community briefing?
And that's just to reiterate, that's not just for Joey. Anybody who wants to reach out to us, feel free to do so. We are in CCNSF mode from here on in, so feel free to reach out to us with any of the questions that we didn't address this Q&A.
Great. Thanks, everybody.
Okay, this recording will be made available. Give us about 48 hours. We'll put it on the website, and we look forward to your applications.
Don't worry. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you, partners.
Thank you.